I am Patrice Strachan. I am a Transit Programs Manager here at DRPT. And on the webinar with us today are Jennifer DeBrule, who is our Chief of Public Transportation, Marie Berry, the Manager of Financial Planning, or Programming, here at DRPT, Neil Sherman, the Director of Statewide Transit Programs, Grant Sparks, our Director of Transit Planning and Corridor Development, and Haley Glynn, our Public Relations and Marketing Specialist. I would ask everyone who's on the call today, if you would please look at the instrument panel on your right-hand side of your screen. First thing to note is towards the bottom of that panel, you will see two handouts available to access and download. Those are important handouts. The first is a copy of this slide presentation that you're welcome to download and use after our presentation today. The second is called the Grants Administration Procedures document. It's also affectionately called the Purple Book, and will be referenced several times today in our presentation. So those are two important documents that you may choose to download and use. We have built into this presentation some designated question and answer periods. They're already built into the program, so if you have questions along the way, would you please submit them through the chat feature, which is located at the bottom of your panel on the right-hand side, or you may also use the raise your hand function, and we will get in touch with you either way. So we'd appreciate if you would submit your questions that way. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to, oh, you know what? One person I didn't introduce yet is Xavier Harmony. Xavier is in our Northern Virginia. He is also a Transit Programs Manager. And Xavier, I'm going to pass this on to you. Take it away.
Thanks, Patrice. I figured you were going to let me just introduce myself. Hi all. I'm Xavier Harmony. I'm your primary presenter for this afternoon, and I'm a Northern Virginia Transit Programs Manager. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that this presentation and this webinar is a team effort with several of my DRPT colleagues contributing slides and information for me to share with you all today. These colleagues will be on standby to help answer any questions you might have, so you're not relying on just me. So before I begin, I'm going to go through just a few housekeeping items. As Patrice mentioned, all participants are in listen-only mode, but there are question and answer breaks throughout the webinar. There will also be question and answer time at the end of the webinar. On the screen, you can see how to ask questions, as Patrice had mentioned. And I also want to point out that this webinar will be posted on the Merit webpage, I think within 1 or 2 days. So keep an eye on the webpage for that. So we do have a lot to cover today. We have a packed agenda, but there's a lot of information updates for you all. This workshop is for both transit agencies and planning organizations. We've tried to indicate which topics might be more relevant to which organizations, but I encourage you to listen to it all. We have also indicated where we have provided breaks for questions throughout the webinar. You can see that by the red Q&A in several of these sections. We're going to begin by focusing on grants before moving on to planning topics and other DRPT initiatives. I will be covering myself everything except section 2, which is covered by Marie Berry. However, like I mentioned before, my DRPT colleagues are standing by to help me answer any questions. Everything covered today is included in DRPT's Grant Administration Procedures book, the Purple Book. This is the one highlighted on the left here on the screen. This is the companion guide to the Blue Book, our grant application manual. Both can be found in the Olga portal. DRPT staff have worked hard on creating the Purple Book, and it should be your first point of reference for any grant administration questions. If, when using this book, you find there are any issues or any gaps, please let us know so we can improve this document. Okay, now I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Marie, to cover development and execution of grant agreements.
Thanks, Xavier. Again, my name is Marie Berry. I'm the Manager of Financial Programming. Most of you know who I am, and if you're new, then you'll get to know me soon. Let's just jump right into it. I'm going to be discussing grant agreements from fiscal year 22. The CTB has approved the SIP as of June 23rd. And so now all the agreements should be posted to Olga. They are currently being reviewed still, and the only ones that have not been posted, and actually this slide is now outdated because the FTA just awarded the 5303 funds yesterday. So all the agreements for 5303 have been posted as of this morning, but it's going to take a while to get through the review process before the grantees can see them. If you don't see your agreements in the next week or so, contact your program manager or myself, and we'll see why you can't see it, because it could be still going through a review process. It could be something technical with the system. So we just want to make sure that you are getting your agreements. The other agreements that we are also waiting to post are the 5311 operating. We will probably post those next week. We were just trying to clear through some of the other more important agreements through the system first, and some of the 100% operating that you are entitled to. As you know, once I post it to Olga, there is an internal review process where your program manager, their manager, finance have to review it before it gets to the grantee. So there are some steps that we have to go through before you get the final sign off. Okay, next slide. Okay, so for state match agreements, the instructions are in the Purple Book. So please refer to the Purple Book before contacting your program manager or myself if you're not sure what to do. You need to make sure, if you are getting a state match agreements, these are match agreements to your federal funds. So you need to make sure your TIP and STIP requirements are met. Make sure your funding is in both those documents. And you need to be working with your MPOs to make sure that they are in the required TIPs. There are FTA requirements, there's VDOT requirements, there's also our requirements that you need to go through before a state match agreement can be written. There are several steps regarding FTA funds and flexing of funds. All that, again, is covered in the Purple Book, so please refer to that. Because it really depends on what kind of funding you're getting. That determines how to manage this process. And again, there's an internal procedure once we upload the agreements to Olga. And so it will take some time once you make the request to get the funding. And again, there's also a timing involved. Once you execute it, we also need to get the DRPT director or our CFO to fully execute any agreement. And that's when you are able to initiate drawdowns on your projects. Also, making sure if you are getting FTA funding, make sure your certs and assurances, the most recent one is pinned in Olga. And if you're getting 5311, there's also a warranty arrangement document that needs to be signed. So make sure both of those are covered in your Olga system. And again, the project manager should be able to direct you to how to do that if you need some instruction on that. Okay, next slide. So when you get these agreements, oops, sorry, need to go back. Sorry, one more. Yeah. When the grantees, when you get your agreements, please read the whole agreement, because once you execute it, and we've executed it, it's really the only way to change it is through an amendment. So if you see something wrong in there, you need to report that immediately to your program manager, and we will get that addressed before anybody fully executes these agreements. And the TIP and the STIP are located on the DRPT website. Also make sure the person executing your agreements are authorized to do so, because otherwise your agreements are invalid and not legal. Because if you don't have the person that's authorized to bind your agency under this agreement, then it's not a valid agreement. So just make sure the right person is executing the agreements. And then the last, okay, so a few things about Olga. This is not a new feature, but it's a feature that people seem to forget is out there. If you are going to be canceling a project that you were awarded funds for that you have not executed agreement for, you can cancel it through OLGA. There is a cancel section in there. Or if you found out that you don't need as much money as you got awarded, you can also reduce the funding amounts in this section. So if any of those things happen, you can actually go into the system and cancel or reduce your unexecuted project amounts. Also, the state master agreements are now available in OLGA for you to view and download. So once you've, the last ones everybody have executed are from 2020. Those should all be out there. If you can't see it, let me know and we'll figure out why you can't see it. And again, make sure all your OLGA users are current, and make sure your OLGA master users especially are current. And if they're not, you need to be filling out a new system access document to assign a current employee as a master user. And I think that's it. Do we have any questions? Wow, really? Everybody awake?
Hopefully that's a good sign.
I covered everything.
I don't see any questions in the panel or in the hand raises, so I think we can move on.
Okay, great.
Cool. Thanks, Marie. And as a reminder, everything Marie covered is in the purple book. So if you have questions later on, hopefully they can be answered in that document. So our next section is grant administration. And there are several subsections here because this is quite an important topic and really one of the main topics of this webinar today. So starting with reimbursement, all reimbursement requests must be submitted through OLGA. Reimbursement requests should be submitted at least quarterly, but no more than once per month per project. This, of course, assumes expenditures have been made during that quarter. There are 4 types of reimbursement documentation that I'll be covering today: summary sheets, support documents, indirect costs, and travel reimbursement. These first 2 should be included with every reimbursement, and the last 2 are only included where they're applicable. As a reminder, state operating grants are paid on a payment schedule outlined in your state operating agreement. Hence, reimbursements are not needed to receive your state operating funds. So starting with the summary sheet, this is an example summary sheet that we have showed in previous years. And this shows all the key detail that you would need in a summary sheet. I'm not going to go through it all in detail. This is just an example, but the purple book does list everything that you need to include at a minimum for your summary sheet. This is a requirement in OLGA for your OLGA reimbursements. And if you do not include one, your program manager will either ask you to submit one in support of your documentation, or you'll be asked to resubmit the entire reimbursement. So please keep this in mind. In addition to the summary sheet, there are support documents. Every expense charged to the project must have supporting documentation. Supporting documents should be arranged and numbered in the identical order as listed in the summary sheet. This makes it easier for program managers to track and approve expenses. For partially reimbursed invoices, recipients must note the amount that is being charged and provide an explanation for their difference. So, for example, if some of the funds are not eligible, if you're charging a reimbursement where funds exceed the DSRA rates and you're only asking to be reimbursed with GSA, or you're submitting a project, a reimbursement that is also being reimbursed by another grant, these are all examples where you will be submitting a partial reimbursement. You must also include all documents from contractor invoices. This again helps program managers do the math essentially to verify and approve documentation. And finally, the purple book has a lot more detail, so please use that as your first reference. Indirect costs. For indirect costs to be eligible for a grant, recipients must include their indirect costs as a line item budget category in your grant application, prepare a cost allocation plan for the calculation of indirect cost rate, and provide indirect cost rate approval letter from VDOT or cognizant federal agency DRPT. If all that is in place, then you can submit indirect costs as part of your reimbursement. FDA 5311 fund reimbursement require an indirect cost rate proposal, or you can use a maximum rate of 10%. Finally, please refer to the purple book for more details here. Some, but not all grant programs can allow indirect costs, so this is not going to apply to you all. Travel reimbursement. This is one some of my grantees will know I follow up with them a lot about. So we follow Virginia travel regulations, GSA and IRS rates and rules, and these also apply to your contractors. So if you have a contractor or a design consultant, for example, using a hotel, they use the same GSA rates as you would if you're applying for reimbursement. Example reimbursement documentation is listed below. We have a lot more detail in the purple book, but travel summary sheets are highly recommended. These will look very similar to the summary sheets I mentioned before. Lodging receipts, meals, receipts for parking tolls, travel maps showing mileage retaking. These are all important types of travel reimbursement. I will point out that lodging and meals need to abide by the DSA rates, but recap reimbursement have a little bit of a different detail, and they'll be addressed later in this presentation. So I do want to really emphasize the travel map showing mileage and route taken, because this is something I've seen as a common sort of issue with reimbursement. So I decided to provide an example. This is a really simple example of a travel documentation. As you can see, this is just a Google Maps printout. You can use Google Maps or an equivalent map provider. You can show that this shows the route between two locations, and it shows the mileage. In this case, there's 102 miles for this route. So this is all we're asking for when we ask for travel reimbursement, for travel documentation. It's not too complicated, but it is definitely a common oversight we see in reimbursement. Extension request. So all extension requests must be submitted in Augur 30 days or more before the project end date. We really emphasize that you should not wait until the last minute. If you submit with less than 30 days, it increases the risk of your extension being denied or the grant closing before an extension can be granted. There is an approval process that must happen once you have submitted that extension request, and so the 30 days allows us time to get through that process. There are two primary grant extension guidelines that we have in our documentation: one extension per project and a maximum extension time of 12 months. Any extensions beyond these parameters will require executive level approval on a case-by-case basis. Finally, I want to emphasize there's no guarantee that a request for extension will be approved. Just because you've been working with your program manager and just because you got it submitted in time does not mean that it is a slam dunk that will be approved. Please keep this in mind. When you're submitting your extension request, we ask that you include a reason and explanation for the need for an extension, any new project schedule or updated milestones, and any relevant supporting materials. I really like to emphasize this last point because this makes it much easier to approve an extension request. For example, if you have a purchase order already made and you have not yet received whatever the grant is funding, then that purchase order will be very valuable documentation and would make the extension request a lot easier to approve. I want to also ensure that your DRPT program manager knows you need an extension request. Involving them early and often can help make the process easier and ensure that all extensions are submitted in time. And again, I want to emphasize that there is no guarantee an extension request will be approved. This is best practice I'm describing on these slides, and it will help the application, but it won't guarantee approval. Next is project budget and scope changes. First and foremost, talk to your DRPT program manager. There are a couple of reasons for this. First, the program manager can provide you with the appropriate form and help step you through the process. But also, these project and scope change requests happen through your program manager. They don't happen through Augur, so you need to involve your program manager throughout the process. Scope changes may be allowed if the change does not materially alter the original intent of the project. This is the wording used in the purple book, and I recognize it sounds a little ambiguous, so we provided some examples. For example, if you increase or decrease the number of units in your grant, if you change from hardware to software or vice versa, or if you change revenue vehicle type, so for example, if you're changing from like a 40-foot bus to a 30-foot bus, for example, these are all within that scope of materially alter. But again, we recommend you start working with your program manager nice and early so that they can help you understand what might work and might not. They might be able to provide some insight and guidance to help you with this, what materially alter means. And then finally, and pretty importantly, merit scored and awarded projects have special rules. Because we introduced merit process in FY20, we introduced scoring and scoring cutoffs that are important with how projects are allocated funds. Consequently, any time there's a project scope or budget change, you have to be rescored. The project has to be rescored, and it has to still meet the same scoring threshold for the year it was awarded. So, for example, if you were awarded a project in FY22 and you met the threshold FY22, but your rescored project does not meet that threshold, then you cannot get that scope change. So please keep that in mind. Talk to your program managers; they'll be able to help you figure that out. And again, I want to emphasize that just because you submit a request doesn't mean it'll be approved. This is the last section of grant administration, and then we'll open up some questions again. This is grant closeout. So when you reach the end of your project, you must submit a final reinvestment request. A final reinvestment request must be submitted through OLGA within 90 calendar days of the final expenditure or project end date, whichever occurs first. When doing this, you check the box in OLGA indicating there's a final reinvestment request. In addition to this, you must complete a project deobligation through OLGA. A deobligation just releases the remaining funds in the grant back to DRPT and allows these funds to be used for other projects. A deobligation is needed for all projects, even those with very low balances. That concludes grant administration. Do we have any questions at this time?
Patrice, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, we did receive one question through the chat from Lisa Guthrie. Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to ask Marie to address this question. The question is, can you speak to the fiscal year 21 and the fiscal year 22 dates, since we're not back to the regular grant years? And I think she's referring to FY21 was, officially approved by CTB in December, which caused the years to be a little bit different.
So the approvals were throughout 21, but the actual projects, we backdated them. So even though the approvals were piecemeal coming from the CTB, we tried to give out the grants to cover 21 activity as early as we could to cover the activity for our grantees. So as I know 21 was an unusual year, but we did we worked really hard to make sure every grantee was not negatively affected by the fact that we had to piecemeal get the CTB to approve a bunch of the projects. So really our priority was operating and making sure everybody had enough operating funds to get them to 21. And I think we did that. So starting with fiscal year 22, we really are starting back to where a normal year where we had a CTB approval of the SIP when it was supposed to be approved. So I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but 21, even though the CTB approved things in pieces, we really meant for everything to cover fiscal year 21. Even though the last approval was in December, we backdated everything to January 1st of 2020 so that everybody could still get reimbursed for their capital items. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if that was what it related to.
Lisa, let us know if that it didn't answer your question. I think everyone, just for the sake of everyone on the call, beginning now with fiscal year 22 and this most recent grant cycle, we're back on the, quote, regular cycle. Everything is back in play the way it was prior to COVID. Lisa, if we didn't address your question, please add more. And that was the only question that came through the chat.
I actually saw one other. Let's see. So from Aiden Cork.
Okay.
It says that we still have fiscal year 21 grants that have no contract available. This was due to COVID. Will this be available in the future?
If it was awarded in a SIP, then yes, it's always available until you're ready to contract for it. Is it? I assume is it federal money?
Aiden, I'm going to go ahead and let me just look real fast. Unmute everybody and you can unmute yourself if you'd like to speak. Aiden or Lisa.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey, yeah, so just real quick. So we're about to order some new buses, and that's off of our FY21 or FY21 grants. We see that we have the milestones in there and things like that, but there's no contract available here on the right side. I could be mistaken, and I'll follow up with Xavier. He's our program manager, but I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the group. Our grants manager, Sharon Sullivan, brought this to my attention yesterday, so it might be a good time to mention it.
Okay, so the only contracts we haven't written are ones where we haven't gotten federal grant information. So if I don't have that, then I can't write the contract. So you just need to work with Xavier to make sure you've got the federal grants secured, and then we can work on getting the agreements out there.
Sounds good. That makes sense. Yeah, this was FY21 money, so this was before I got here. So let me get with Xavier. We'll get us all settled up. Thank you very much.
All right, and then there was another one. They saw that the grant year extends to December 22 instead of June 30th, 22. Can you speak to that? That was Lisa following up.
Is it a current, so the current agreement that's out there? So the grant end dates, I'm not sure which agreements, they all have different end dates. So just in general, those end dates are flexible. If you don't want it to go to December 31st, 22, we don't have to make it go that far. There's a lot of grants that are just a strict fiscal year, but there's some grants we allow additional time to accomplish because not everything could be done in a year. A lot of our operating grants are on a strict year, but everything else that's like a study or technical assistance or things that could possibly go beyond a year, we do give extra time to.
Lisa said thank you. And then the last thing was that Xavier's sound is sounding a little choppy. Is there anything that you can do to improve that, Xavier?
I'm not sure.
Actually, you sound better right now.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just try and speak louder to see if that helps.
All right, let's see. Looks like there are no further questions that I see in the chat right now. I'd like to give a second if anybody's typing, but let's see. All right, I think we can move on to the next section.
Great, sounds good. So the next section is project oversight. So there are two parts to this section. There's quarterly reviews and engineering oversight. So starting quarterly reviews, at a minimum, these cover progress status updates for your grants. So basically how the grants are going on, how the construction's going, or how the purchases are going, etc. And then any extensions of the obligations that might be needed, just bringing these to the attention of your program manager. However, there's not just the limit of the scope of these meetings. For example, we could cover areas of improvement, asset management, inventory review, performance data review, and all the contract information updates. So, for example, if you have a staffing change and we see that whoever is listed as a point of contact in Augur is no longer the right person to contact, then we'll let you know so your master user can change the contact information. I do want to point out that 5311 grants have additional oversight. The supplement book has more details. So this covers things like drug and alcohol, preventative maintenance, and civil rights like Title VI and ADA complaints. Project oversight engineering. So engineering oversight is included for projects that have either a design and or a construction activity component. Oversight activities will be performed by DRPT staff or consultants. The level of oversight depends on the perceived risk assessed by DRPT staff, and it's determined by things like funding source, cost, complexity of a project, and the grantee's experience administrating similar projects. Again, more details about what oversight is included at each risk level is in the purple book. Training assistance. So DRPT administers two training programs, the STA Rural Transit and Assistance Program, or RTAP, and the state-funded Small Urban Transit Program. Grants or scholarships can be used to fund transit training, seminars, workshops, and conferences for rural and specialized transit operators. RTAP and small urban scholarship requests must be submitted through the ORGA application process. For reimbursements, RTAP grants can be reimbursed up to 100%, while small urban grants will be reimbursed up to 95% of eligible expenses. And then finally, for RTAP funding, there are some special guidelines that need to be followed. For example, trips need to be pre-approved, mileage is not reimbursable, etc. This is all outlined in the purple book. So I know this wasn't a long section, but I'll pause here to see if anyone has any questions.
All right, I don't see any questions.
Okay, sounds good. I'll carry on. As a reminder, we have question time at the end as well. So if you want to hold your questions for later, that's also fine. Asset management. So as hopefully everyone knows, DRPT uses TransAm as our system for asset inventory. In this system, we include revenue vehicles, so buses, rail, ferries, etc., equipment, facilities, and infrastructure. Agencies should be updating their asset data at least twice a year, in February and in July. The February deadline coincides with grant application due date. Updates should include age, condition, mileage, and any changes in life cycle events. So, for example, if a bus goes into service, out of service, gets disposed, etc., this all needs to be recorded in TransAm. I really want to emphasize that anything you want funded by DRPT now or in the future should be in TransAm, because we use TransAm for our scoring in our merit process. All capital projects are based on TransAm data. And I'm not going to name names, but I do know of at least one example where a grantee has lost out of funding because they did not get TransAm up to date. They actually submitted more up-to-date information in a grant application one year than in TransAm. And actually, if they'd used the most up-to-date information in their grant application, they would have been awarded funding. But because they did not update TransAm, which is what data we use, they actually did not get awarded funds for that project that year. This one grantee learned their lesson the hard way, but hopefully their experience will hopefully stop others from learning this the hard way. So please make sure TransAm is up to date. We want to try and maximize everyone's ability to receive funding. Transit Asset Management Plans, or TAM plans. So this is coming from a final rule that was published in 2016. It's required if an agency owns, operates, or manages capital assets for public transportation and receives federal financial assistance. Transit agencies who must create their own plans either have more than 100 vehicles in all fixed route modes, more than 100 vehicles in one non-fixed route mode, or rail operators. Transit agencies who can participate in DRPT's group plans have either 100 vehicles or less across all fixed route modes, or 100 vehicles or less in one non-fixed route mode. There are 4 elements of the group plan: inventory of capital assets, conditions assessment, decision support tool, which helps making asset inventory investment decisions, and investment prioritization, which guides asset investment. There are some ongoing requirements of TAM plans. So initial plans were submitted in September 2018. Fully revised plans are due every 4 years, which means the next ones are due in October 2022. DRPT will be kicking off the 2022 plan update process this summer, so keep an eye out for any emails from DRPT. Grantees must provide annual updates to NTD, including asset inventory, condition assessments, and performance results, projected targets for the next fiscal year, and a narrative report. For any questions, we ask that you contact Wood Hudson, one of our transit planners. His email is on the screen, but any of your program managers will also be able to provide you his contact details if you ask them. Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTAS. So PTAS, the PTAS promotes system safety through 3 elements. There are safety management system principles, which themselves are 4 elements, including safety management policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. They also promote safety through managing safety risks and prioritizing capital investments that promote safety. All public transportation systems receiving 5307 funds must create a safety plan if they have more than 100 vehicles in peak revenue service or operate rail. They must create their own plans. if they have 100 vehicles or less in peak revenue service, they can participate in DRPT's group plan. Initial PTAS were due in July last year, but because of COVID, this was extended to July 2021. Agencies must review PTAS annually and document approved changes, including group plan participants. So I know all of you should be familiar with this process we've just gone through over the last few months in preparation for the new deadline. And the PTAS plans must be signed off by agencies accountable executive, board of directors or equivalent authority, and self-certification is required annually. And then one more section before we get to more questions, the general transfer fee specification. So this is a project DRPT has initiated. It's created a new statewide clearinghouse at virginia-gtfs.com. It's maintained by our consultants, Kimberly Horn and Trillium Transit. GTFS feeds are added to Google Maps and are available for others to use on other platforms. So, for example, Apple Maps, or if you want to use the information for real-time transit information, for example. DRPT is providing technical assistance to smaller agencies who have not previously had or maintained GTFS datasets. You should know who you are as DRPT staff and consultants have been reaching out to you and working with you already at this point. Participating agencies can provide route changes to DRPT and Trillium. Larger agencies who maintain their own feeds must notify DRPT if the feed location changes and continue to update static feeds when you make route changes. Again, for any questions, contact Wood Hudson. I was meant to put a question slide in here, but I will pause anyway. Were there any questions about these three sections?
Xavier, I don't see any questions on the chat.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, then I'll just keep moving forward. We'll have a couple more questions periods before we get to the end. And of course, you can always ask questions at the end. So next is the Transit Ridership Incentive Program, or TRIP. So there are a couple of purposes of this program, primarily to promote increased ridership of large urban transit systems and to reduce the barriers to transit use for low-income individuals. There are two major parts, regional connectivity. So there's a few example program projects here. For example, improvement and expansion of routes of regional significance, creation of bus-only lanes from routes of regional significance, and implementation of integrated fare collection. And there's also the zero fare and low-income pilot program. So eligible projects include subsidized or fully free passes to low-income populations, the elimination of fares on high-capacity corridors, or the deployment of an entirely zero fare system. So there are some key themes when we're evaluating these projects. Proposals must have been researched and conform with long-term planning documents. These proposals must be developed through partnership with local and regional organizations, and they must be essentially shovel-ready. As you can see on the slide, we have a bit of a timeline for the next few months. We're hoping CCB approves the TRIP program this month, which would allow for, at the end of the month, application periods to open. We will close the application period in late August and hopefully have PTB approval of the final selected TRIP project in fall of this year. For any questions or more information, please contact Lauren Fishbein. Again, if you don't have a chance to write down her email address or don't grab it from the PowerPoint presentation, one of your program managers will be able to provide it for you. I also recommend you check out the TRIP website. It's accessible through the DRPT website. I showed a link to this page, but you can also just find it by searching for TRIP in the DRPT webpage. Any questions about the TRIP program? No? Okay.
No, I don't see any on the chat.
Sounds good. We only have a couple sections left, and then we'll open up for questions again. Spot sale, something that's on a lot of people's minds, I think. So, as a bit of a round 4 recap, 6 projects with primary transit improvements and 23 projects with secondary transit improvements were selected for funding in round 4 on Smart Sale. The primary transit projects include projects with transit priority, bus transfer facilities, new transit service, and rail expansion. Secondary transit projects are highway projects that include minor transit features like bus stop improvements. Looking ahead to round 5, the application period opens in March 2022, and DRPT staff are available to review transit or rail infrastructure projects, advise on data requirements, or answer general questions that you have. So for anything transit related, you should reach out to Taylor Jenkins, one of our transit planners. And for anything rail related, you should reach out to Randy Selleck, one of our rail planners. Their contact details are on the screen. As always, you can always just ask one of your program managers to connect you. For grantees that executed small-scale projects, please remember to work with your DRPT program manager to provide, update, and revise project milestones as often as necessary, so that the most accurate project information is available to the public. As a refresher, eligible transit projects are capital in nature and expand capacity. These are very important points that I'm sure anyone talking about smart scale will be emphasizing. The following projects are eligible for funding. So you'll see them on the left side of the screen here: rolling stock to new or expanding service, transfer station and facility, rail infrastructure, transit technology, passenger amenities, bus-only lanes. These are all example projects. This is obviously not a comprehensive list. These are just examples. Conversely, standalone studies, system-wide improvement, and transit maintenance facilities without a capacity expansion are not eligible. The eligibility of applicants varies depending on project type, population size, and the applicant type. For example, a transit agency wouldn't be able to apply for a project that meets the VTAN safety needs. For more information, we recommend you check out the Smart Scale website, where there is a more comprehensive explanation of these technicalities. So while you see on the left, on the right here, eligible applicants, so all these applicants are eligible for all of these projects. So definitely check the Smart Scale website for more information. Final opportunity for questions before we reach the end. No?
No questions.
Great. Makes it easier for me, I guess. Okay. Transit equity and modernization studies. So this is one of the biggest initiatives that we have recently had come to us at DRPT. So the Virginia Transit Equity and Modernization Study was created through Joint House Resolution 542 from the 2021 General Assembly session. The study will complete a needs assessment focusing on equitable delivery of transportation services and modernizations of transit with an emphasis on engagement and underrepresented and underserved communities in the Commonwealth. I know it's a mouthful, but leave it on as a shortened version. The timeline, which you can see on this slide at a high level, is aggressive, with the assessment finished within the next year. We'll start with data collection, then spend some time working with transit agencies, MPOs, local governments, and the general public on understanding needs and opportunities as they relate to equity and modernization. The information collected through the needs assessment will then be advised and action plans, which will be developed later this year and early next year. And finally, we will be submitting a final report in late spring, early summer of 2022. DRPT plans to have significant engagement with our transit agencies and MPOs throughout this process. I know some of you have seen emails come through from us already, but keep an eye out in the coming months for more outreach from both our DRPT email server, from our planners and our program managers, trying to get this information. We are tentatively planning to schedule a study kickoff webinar with our agencies this month, so keep an eye out for that. And then finally, for any information, contact Grant, our Director of Transit Planning. His email is on the screen, but we can also connect you if you need us to ask program managers. So I have some wrap up and next steps before we open the floor for questions again. So as some reminders, the 5310 Human Services Post-Award webinar is next week, Monday, July 19th from 10:30 to 12. The Commuter Assistance Program, or CAP webinar, happened last month, June 29th. The recording is available if you need it. And the FY23 grant workshops will be held in the fall. More details are to come. That's only a couple months away. We've had a few questions about the transit strategic plans. So we're going to let you know the timeline for completing TSPs or TDPs is on hold right now, but transit agencies can move forward with the development of those plans if desired. If there are any questions about TSPs or TDPs right now, you can ask your program manager, or again, reach out to grant staff. I again want to give another plug to the Purple Book. Everything we covered in the webinar today is in the Purple Book, and if it isn't, or you think there's a gap, please let your program manager know, and we'll make sure it's in there. We want this to be a useful resource for our transit agencies and our MPOs for any questions about grants. So please help us. If you think you can help us make this better, please let us know. We want to make this a comprehensive document. Finally, reach out to your program managers with any questions. We are here to help, and we're happy to help. I know my colleagues and I, we all enjoy our work, and we enjoy working out with our transit partners, and we are happy to help in any way we can. So please feel to reach out. And that is it for today. Just if you have any questions, please let us know.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Are there any raised hands?
I'm not seeing anything on my end either.
Okay. Well,
oh, it looks like one just came in. When will the application for the TRIP program kick off?
We are assuming approval by the CTB in July. We are currently anticipating applications opening in late July. I don't know, Jen, if you want to say any more on that, or but that is currently what is proposed. It does depend on CTB approval.
Anyone else with any questions before we log out? Nope, I'm not seeing any.
Well, I'll just add a final comment. We will be emailing to everyone this recording of the webinar today, as well as these handouts again. For anyone that may have missed the webinar, they'll be able to at least view on the recording. I encourage everyone to reach out to your program manager if you have any questions. And we are here to help you. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And I'm not seeing it.
So it looks like Grant put in a comment that Brian Booth had a question. Brian's question was about the application for the TRIP program.
Oh, okay. My bad.
All right, I should have the recordings ready in the next 24 hours or so. So if you want to look for an email in your inboxes, then that would be great. Thank you so much. Is there anything else before we wrap up? Nope. All right, thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks all.
All right, thanks all.